What is up, all you holy rock and rollers, you denizens of podcast land? It is time for the Fortress of Rock. It is Friday night, March the 22nd, 2024. I am fired up. You should be fired up. It's March Madness. It's rock and roll madness. Episode 136 here with the Maestro, Kevin Crane, as always. Glad, ecstatic beyond belief to have you aboard with me on this rock and roll extravaganza we call the Fortress of Rock every Friday night. And if you've listened before, and I hope you have, if not, welcome aboard. Check out the archives to listen to older episodes. We always start off each and every episode Friday nights with News of the World, our tribute to the late great Freddie Mercury and Queen. We have got a lot of tour news. It seems like it's that time of the year. Probably going to start winding down because we're getting into the fall when it comes to these announcements. Once you start seeing fall tour dates creep into the picture, that means that window here in late winter, early spring for these big tour announcements during the summer, that window is closing. But the biggest news when it comes to tours, when it comes to rock and roll this week, in my humble opinion, ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, the Over and Out tour, the farewell tour for Jeff Lynne's ELO has been announced. Sadly, it looks like I will not be partaking in this, as I would figure, with the ridiculous ticket prices that are out there nowadays. A little bit silly with the ticket prices here for the Over and Out tour, which will run from August through October here in 2024, 27 dates throughout North America. And I know, open up the wallet, shell out some bucks. Haven't you always been telling us, Maestro, how you regret that you never got to see the Eagles? Well, two differences. Number one, I have seen ELO before, and they are phenomenal. So if you get a chance to check them out, by all means, do it. The other reason, I have a certain budget for all these different shows. I would prefer, as I've always told you guys, to go see more shows for the same amount of money. So for the money that I could shell out for ELO, who I, again, have already seen, I could see 2 or 3 shows. Just keep that in mind as we cycle through here on our concert talk, because I do have an announcement about a couple shows that I will be reviewing for you in the late summer, early fall months. One of those, the Jubilee Tour. Now, some will debate my choice here between ELO and this particular triple bill, which I find phenomenal. But again, you got to be a fan of 90s music. And that, to me, again, was the last great era of rock and roll, the grunge era, which gave us, of course, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and Live and Stone Temple Pilots, along with Soul Asylum. To me, a great, great triple bill. Now, I've seen all 3 of those bands before, but it's been a long time since I've seen live. STP, Stone Temple Pilots, one of my favorite bands of all time. Soul Asylum, I hold in high regard as well. Now, on some of these dates, now the one I'm seeing, Soul Asylum will be there. STP on this co-headlining deal with Live, they will close the show out. Of course, checking them out down in Noblesville outside of Indianapolis at the Ruoff Music Center, but most of us call it Deer Creek. Our Lady Peace will be opening up on a few dates on this tour, the Jubilee Tour, which runs through August and September. 19 North American dates. So yes, I had to make a tough decision, a little bit cheaper. 3 bands versus 1. Now, I can't remember if I told you guys about this one last week. I look at my notes. I don't see it marked down, so if I repeat myself, I apologize. It's bound to happen as the years and the beers take their effect on my rock and roll brain. But again, with the money I would have spent to go see ELO, this week I got tickets for the STP Live Soul Asylum gig, and then last week, just a ridiculously fantastic show, Plymouth Speedway in northern Indiana, Night Ranger and Jackal with Enough's Enough and Firehouse. Now, I might have mentioned that last week, so I apologize, but there you go. Almost 2 shows for 7 bands instead of just 1. That's how I look at it. The rock and roll economics, the bean counters here at the Fortress of Rock running things told me go ahead and do the 7 bands instead of the 1. You've seen the 1. Yes, it's a farewell tour. Yes, we know how awesome ELO is, but quantity and quality over just quality. Roger Daltrey going solo here in North America. A short trek in June, 9 solo dates, where he will play, of course, Who material, solo material, and do some Q&A. The Pretenders breaking away from opening for the Foo Fighters. 16 solo U.S. dates for them in July and August. Kansas has added 23 more dates to their 50th anniversary tour. The new dates will carry them through the rest of 2024, September through December. And then, of course, we have rumors. Nothing confirmed yet that I have seen. Nothing confirmed yet. You got a ton of money. You are a rock and roll fanatic like me, and you have a ton of money, unlike me. We just mentioned the Eagles. I mentioned my bitterness. The rock and roll gods have not really allowed me between financial constraints and then in the old days, Glenn Frey's sickness. I had tickets to see them on the Hell Freezes Over tour. That was when Glenn Frey got sick. I believe he had to have abdominal surgery. Decided to get a refund on the tickets. And the rest is a rock and roll tragedy for the Maestro. But the Eagles, again, if you want to fly out to Las Vegas, make a week of it. Very, very reputable sources that I have seen are close to confirming that the Eagles will take over the Sphere in Las Vegas. Yes, a residency after U2 and a short stint for Fish, and then Dead and Company. The Eagles will take over the Sphere in Las Vegas for approximately 10 weeks, September into December of 2024. Now, of course, we know they're on their farewell tour, just like ELO. So this will now extend their farewell tour to the end of 2024 with the Sphere residency that we're hearing that is almost certainly a done deal. So now there's your concert news. Now, if you want to go out with a bunch of people, do something involving music, but it's not a concert, it's not a show per se. And I personally find this kind of ridiculous and pathetic beyond all belief. But everybody's got their little eccentricities, their quirks, the things they will spend a ton of money on when they really probably shouldn't. So we know Pearl Jam is coming out with their brand new album, Dark Matter. And of course, Pearl Jam is extremely popular. I love Pearl Jam. And I plan on getting the album, even overpaying for the physical CD, still ashamed and embarrassed at some of the prices that are being put out there if you want to own physical music. And Pearl Jam is one of the biggest perpetrators of this, because I know Gigaton, their last album, I had to buy the digital version and burn a copy for myself because the physical copy was running $17, $18 for a single CD. Well, now Dark Matter's not much better. The best price I've seen so far is $16. I will probably shell out $16. Now I will check out how much the digital version is, and if the digital version is under 10, I'll probably buy that instead and just burn a copy. That's how my mind works, kids. The case, the artwork, the lyrics, liner notes, about $3-4 is my limit. I'll pay $3 or $4 more for all that. Once a band, a performer goes beyond that, I will just buy the digital and I'll make do with burning my own copy. But I digress. So Pearl Jam, Dark Matter, $16 right now at Amazon. Best price I've seen. 3 days early. I believe the release date is April the 19th for Dark Matter. But you can listen to it early on April the 16th. All you have to do is buy a ticket to a select theater, a movie theater here in the US or anywhere across the globe, I guess. This is a worldwide event. So think about how much ticket prices usually are. But even if it's $10, $12, which I doubt it is, but let's just err on the side of caution. $10 to $12. Do you really want to shell out $10 to $12 just to hear an album 3 days early? You don't get a physical copy. You don't get a digital copy, at least not that I've seen. Just so you can listen to an album in the dark with a bunch of strangers. Yes, you can bring along sucker friends who are more than willing to shell out that kind of money just like you. As much as I love rock and roll, ain't gonna do it. So again, if you want to buy tickets to listen to an album 3 days early before you can listen to it for free on Spotify or wherever you stream your music, have at it. It's a waste of money. Oh, but they're going to play it twice. And again, we're not talking about Pearl Jam performing it for you, even on a movie screen from a studio. They're just playing the studio album. But you get it twice. You get it twice. Once in complete darkness, and then the second time through with visuals, visual stimulation. I don't like this. I just don't like this at all. But again, some people will go nutsy cuckoo gaga for this. I'm not one of them. I will use the money to actually buy the physical version. And then I can listen to it in the dark in my house, here in the studio, the Fortress of Rock studio. Oh, and we've got some classic rock and roll fanatics who are mad. Again, we're being deceived. Nothing new. We all know about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame vote. We all know that the fan vote counts about 1/1000th of the total votes that will either put somebody in the Rock Hall of Fame or deny them. We all know this, right? We should all know this by now. We had, for many, many weeks, Ozzy Osbourne and Foreigner leading the way. Well, things have changed. I don't know what happened. A fan vote uprising, something on social media, a campaign that I don't know about from the Dave Matthews Band to push the fan vote, but the Dave Matthews Band has surged out into the lead ahead of Ozzy Osbourne and Foreigner. But again, in the end, does it matter? 1/1000th of the votes. This fan vote is consolidated into 1/1000th, so it doesn't matter. Why get upset about it? And I do believe that the Dave Matthews Band have been nominated before. They have won the fan vote before, and they are the only band in the history of the fan vote to win it and not get elected into the Rock Hall of Fame. So keep that in mind. We all know they're going to screw it up. I'm numb to this now. I'm just numb to it. I will vote. I will be a moron. It only takes me 30 seconds a day. I will vote. I've told you guys who I've been voting for every day. And I have been voting for Dave Matthews Band along with Foreigner and along with Ozzy Osbourne. Cher, Oasis, Kool and the Gang, Peter Frampton. There you go. Now, we already covered our tour news of the week. Now, a few months ago, I told you guys, bought tickets to see Styx and Foreigner with John Waite. That will also be a summer concert review to look forward to here on the Fortress of Rock. But Styx, now this is not the classic lineup. We all know that. The classic lineup from Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight, Paradise Theater. We know that. This is not the cornerstone. This is not that classic lineup. Dennis DeYoung has been gone for quite a while. The Pinozzos. So it's basically Tommy Shaw, James Young, and a bunch of guys who have been with the band for quite a while, but still not the classic lineup. They have recorded a few albums, studio albums, of course, with Shaw and Young. One of those being Ricky Phillips. Ricky Phillips has been the bass player for Styx for over 2 decades. He's been with the band since 2003, but here on the eve of their tour with Foreigner and John Waite, Ricky Phillips is leaving the band. No word yet on who will replace him. Again, not the classic lineup, not the classic bass player. That would be one of the Pinozzo brothers, of course. The Pinozzos were on bass and drums. So, not exactly earth-shattering news, but hopefully Styx can find someone to fill in. I'm sure they can. ZZ Top pulled in their bass tech, their guitar tech, when unfortunately Dusty Hill died, and he ended up becoming a permanent member of what is now ZZ Top. So there you go. There's always somebody in the shadows who can fill in. And finally, wrapping up news of the world, this is a story that I did not cover last week. I should have, but I did not. It's a good thing for once that my addled brain missed this, because we found another layer to it here today, right before we went into the studio to tape this episode. Now, initially, I was going to rip on Neil Young, hypocrite, neo-hippie, doofus that he is, for jumping back on Spotify. Jumps back on Spotify. Why? Because Joe Rogan, his contract, exclusive contract with Spotify for his podcast expired. So now Joe Rogan is available on all the major streaming platforms, including Apple and Amazon. So Neil Young says basically, oh, well, now I'm just going to have to go back to Spotify because I can't quit Apple and Amazon too, because then I'd be denying my fans too many options for streaming my music. Okay. Sound logic. Shaky. And of course, he had to take a dig at Spotify when he made this announcement. Who, of course, cares about it? Some of you might. I sure as heck don't. I care because it just shows the hypocrisy and the stupidity of a lot of these celebrities and rock and roll stars. So Neil Young back on Spotify because Joe Rogan is now available in more places. But then Neil Young says, well, Spotify really needs to do something about their, quote, low res, unquote, of course, low resolution sound quality. So I'm begrudgingly coming back, number one, because Joe Rogan is now available in more places. And despite the fact that I don't feel that the sound quality of Spotify is all that great. So let's get this right. As I read between the lines, Neil Young, obviously, as I said, a neo hippie. So aren't neo hippies supposed to care about free speech and freedom of expression? Yet they conveniently like to call people like Joe Rogan spreaders of disinformation and try to protest and censor their viewpoints because they don't agree with Neil Young's viewpoint. And yes, I know some are going to say, well, it's science. Whatever. I'm not Aaron Rodgers. I'm not a conspiracy theorist to the extent that he is. But I do agree with people that kept an open mind about the vaccines when we had the COVID pandemic. I didn't dismiss them outright. I got a shot, I got a booster. But am I saying I was 100% sold on it? Was I 100% convinced that it was going to protect me and it wasn't going to hurt me? No. I did it because I was forced to, because the government said if you don't, you can't go to concerts, you can't go to sporting events. So in a way, it was blackmail. So Mr. Neil Young and his stance, of course, he didn't like Joe Rogan putting out options and theories about things that were anti-government, let's put it that way, when it came to the forcing of the vaccine on people. And again, I got shots. I did it. So don't lump me in with the conspiracy theorists per se. I'm always in the middle where common sense prevails. So I'm not Neil Young and I'm not Aaron Rodgers. But this immature attitude Neil Young has had, all for free speech, but censor Joe Rogan. Got to get on Spotify, but I think they're low resolution. And this is the other point. What is Neil Young suggesting? Why is he complaining about the low resolution quality of Spotify? Does he want to add an extra tier where people would have to pay or pay more for high definition audio where he could make more money? That's what it seems he's implying. So Mr. I'm trying to think of my fans actually probably wants his fans to pay more to listen to his music. And the reason why this is more relevant this week than last week is because another one of his neo-hippie buddies, Joni Mitchell, just did the exact same thing. She had quit Spotify along with Neil Young because of the whole Joe Rogan fiasco. And now she's said, well, if Neil Young's going to join back in on Spotify, then I should too. Another rock and roll hypocrite. You guys judge how you want to judge. I hate politics again. Like I said, I hate the left, I hate the right. The middle is for common sense. And that is where the Maestro resides. I also reside in the Rock and Roll DeLorean coming up in a couple segments, but of course, next, as always, each and every week, is Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty. New music this week. Great new album from the Black Crowes, along with a couple songs from Slash with Brian Johnson of AC/DC, and new song from Sebastian Bach as well. So a quick break, pause, run away for 60 seconds and go to the bathroom, do what you got to do, grab some nachos, because the Fortress of Rock will be back in 1 minute. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Segment 2 here, the heart, the guts of each and every week's podcast episode is, of course, Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. This is new music from older bands, for the most part, the bands that we know and love, and occasionally we dip our toes into newer music. But this is pretty much old school this week. They've been away for a while. Now they came back, they've been touring a little bit, put out a covers EP recently. But we finally, after over a decade, have a new album from the Black Crowes, new material from beginning to end. 10 songs from the Robinson Brothers. Happiness Bastards. Tell you right now, very, very good album. I'll get into more detail here as we go track by track through the 10 songs on Happiness Bastards. Now, the album starts off with Bedside Manners, and right away you can feel the energy level. You can feel they are happy to be back together, putting out new music. Hopefully, all the differences have been put aside. This won't turn into an Oasis situation where they start bickering again and they break up again and they get back together again and threaten to kill each other, whatever the Gallaghers do. But Bedside Manners, you can feel that energy level right away. And hallmark of the Black Crowes, of course, you can hear it throughout the album, present on Bedside Manners, is that wicked slide guitar. So we start off right away with a great, great song, Bedside Manners. Then we get into the very interesting second song, Rats and Clowns. Now, of course, I mentioned in segment one how much I love the physical CD, album, whatever your choice of format is. I want the lyric sheet, I want the artwork. Now, unfortunately, I did buy Happiness Bastards, and the Black Crowes do not make it easy on you when it comes to the lyric sheet. So instead, I went to trusty Spotify, who Neil Young hates, and I decided to click on the lyrics for most of the album here with Happiness Bastards, and Rats and Clowns was the one that stood out. Rats and Clowns, if you read the lyrics, sounds like it is a song written from the perspective of a drug dealer. But it's not a downbeat, dreary, bleak song. Again, the energy level is up, maintained from Bedside Manners. It's just a sneaky, bleak, dark song. Again, up tempo, talking about a drug dealer. That's how I interpret it. If you hear it differently, you let me know. But it's still a great song, very creative that they would write the lyrics in this manner. Then the next two songs, of course, are the two singles that we have reviewed in the past here on the Fortress of Rock. Track 3 is Cross Your Fingers. I've told you guys, it's growing on me. It's growing on me. It was one of our top songs on last week's episode. And then, of course, track 4, the leadoff single, the phenomenal Wanting and Waiting, still probably my top contender as we get to the quarter point in 2024. 3 months in, Wanting and Waiting is still probably my choice for Song of the Year to this point. And then everything gets dialed down a little bit. You knew it was going to happen. For the most part, these artists cannot stay away from doing a slower song or two. But in this case, track 5, Wilted Rose, very, very pretty song. Lainey Wilson joins in, of course. Very popular country artist. Some of us who do not delve into country music know her better from her stint recently in Yellowstone, the mega popular TV show streaming on Paramount Plus. Wilted Rose is just a nice, slower tempo. It's a beautiful song. It really is. And once we get through all 10 songs, I will explain sequencing and why it makes Happiness Bastards a much better album than a lot of the albums that I've reviewed over the last couple years. Now we get into Dirty Cold Sun. Very cool tune. Very, very cool tune. Probably my second favorite next to Wanting and Waiting. Bedside Manners would be up there as well. You get a little bit of an almost James Brown. I'm freezing. I'm freezing. I know you guys love it when I try to sing. But listen to Dirty Cold Sun and tell me if I'm really all that far off. But it does sound kind of like James Brown or Eddie Murphy doing James Brown. Hot in a hot tub. But it's a great song. I am not mocking it. I'm not trying to make fun of it. It is a great, great song. So check out Dirty Cold Sun, track 6, and then track 7. Bleed It Dry. Heavier blues, maybe. Harmonica. Maybe kind of an homage to the Stones. Let It Bleed. Bleed It Dry. The sound is pretty reminiscent of old Stones. Now, track 8, I've read some reviews of Happiness Bastards, and track 8 seems to be the one that every critic out there is going gaga for. I don't know if it's that good, but again, Flesh Wound, track 8, is a little bit reminiscent of that energy level from Bedside Manners that kicked off the album. Again, very joyous, propulsive beat, more slide guitar, some piano in there. Basically singing about, okay, you broke my heart, but I'm okay. I'm discounting it as a flesh wound anyway. It's a very good song. I just think some of the critics that I've read, some of the reviews, going a little too far in crowning that as the best song on the album. Then track 9 is Follow the Moon. More great guitar, a great guitar riff and solo, more slide guitar. And then track 10, we slow it down again with some more harmonica on Kindred Friend. So now let's recap here. I mentioned pacing, I mentioned sequencing. You note how they spread out the two slower songs almost perfectly. Track 5, track 10. Lends itself to the listener focusing more on those songs than getting bored. If you were to bunch slower songs together in the sequencing, and that's a mistake we've seen from a lot of bands recently. So in that sense, number one, phenomenal job by the Black Crowes to set this album up so that you could still slow things down, but you don't bore the listener. You give them one slow one, ramp it up for 3 or 4 songs, slow it down again. You don't get them excited, get the listener rocking and rolling, and then just beat them to a morose pulp with 2 or 3 in a row that don't live up to the previous rockers. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out about Happiness Bastards is, I've told you already at the top of the review, I love, love, love this album. 2 weeks in a row now. And I'm ecstatic about this because it's been so rare. since I've been doing this podcast to have 2 weeks in a row with two fantastic top level album releases. Judas Priest last week with Invincible Shield, and now this week with Happiness Bastards from the Black Crowes. The thing that's interesting about this album, though, I have listened to it and listened to it and listened to it at least once or twice a day since it's come out. It is a cohesive unit. And when I say that, I mean maybe with the exception of Wanting and Waiting. These the album flows. The songs just flow and meld together. It's beautiful if you want to listen to it and focus on it and pop your headphones on and just lay back, or if you just want it on in the background while you're working, watching basketball, whatever you're doing. It's been a long time since I've come across an album where the songs just kind of flow together so well, where you're not picking out this song or that song. Again, I just mentioned, outside of Wanting and Waiting, very hard to differentiate between the other 9 songs. Yeah, I might like Dirty Cold Sun a little bit better, Bedside Manners a little bit better, might not like Bleed It Dry as much, but it's very, very small degrees of difference between liking a song really, really a lot and just liking a song a lot. I hope that makes sense. Now, listening to Invincible Shield, you want to do a compare and contrast as to last week in our featured review. Even though it's great from beginning to end, you can pick and choose songs off the album and pick out your favorites. But with Happiness Bastards, it's just everything melds and flows together so well. I am not, once again, not saying that as an insult. It's a compliment. It's a very, very high compliment. So just like last week with Invincible Shield, highly, highly, highly recommend you check out the brand new album from the Black Crowes, Happiness Bastards. And if you couldn't figure it out by now, Judas Priest and the Black Crowes probably already contending again at the quarter post. Long way to go in this race, but those two albums already contending for the 2024 Fortress of Rock Album of the Year. All right, 2 songs to review for you this week. First up, let's go with Sebastian Bach of Skid Row, formerly of Skid Row. Second single from his upcoming album, which we talked about last week, Child Within the Man, coming out May the 10th. Second single is Everybody Bleeds. First single, of course, was What Do I Got to Lose, which came out late in 2023. I am very, very encouraged by what I'm hearing from Sebastian Bach. Let's put it that way. In his solo career, Sebastian Bach kind of kept the trajectory going with what Skid Row was doing throughout the 3 studio albums they put together with him as the frontman. They started off with kind of the hair metal, leftover 80s feel, then just got harder and harder. Now through Slave to the Grind and Subhuman Race, it worked. And it worked phenomenally well. But then Sebastian, as you could see he is wont to do, pushes it to beyond 11. Let's put it that way. And some of the stuff on albums like Angel Down and Kicking and Screaming were just way too heavy. And he gave up the melodic pretenses that made Skid Row work so well, the hooks, the killer riffs, just to bang his head. Well, along with What Do I Got to Lose, Everybody Bleeds, sounds like he might have figured this out. And he's dialing it down just enough where, again, we're starting to hear the echoes of Slave to the Grind and Subhuman Race, which is a very, very good thing. So everybody burns, everybody bleeds, everybody drowns. Great, great song again from Sebastian Bach. So 2 songs in, looking forward to Child Within the Man. It's all positive, right? All positive. Look at the Maestro this week. Everything's positive. Put on the brakes, slow your roll. This one hurts a little bit because of the pedigree behind this song. But now again, I don't like cover albums. I don't like tribute albums. So Slash, we talked about Orgy of the Damned coming out, his blues covers album with all these massive, huge guest stars appearing on it. And the first single is Killing Floor. Now, Killing Floor is a Howlin' Wolf song. Obviously, Howlin' Wolf, one of those legendary blues players. Slash has brought in AC/DC's Brian Johnson on vocals and Steven Tyler of Aerosmith on harmonica for his take on Killing Floor. This is going to probably shock and surprise you, but Slash, out of the 3, is the most boring of the 3 major participants in Killing Floor. Now, Brian Johnson, fascinating to me that he is not screaming and growling to the point that he does on an AC/DC song or an AC/DC album. He changes his vocal style, fits it into the blues, and it's amazing. It's refreshing to hear. It is wild and crazy. You can still hear it's him, but there's going to be doubt creeping into your mind. But you know it's him. But is it him? But he shows that his voice can change, can morph into something different, which I've got a newfound respect for him. Not that I didn't love him before, but now with this change in his vocal range and vocal stylings, newfound respect for Brian Johnson beyond what I already had. And then Steven Tyler just tears it up on the harmonica. Some of the greatest harmonica work I have ever heard on this song. And then Slash comes in and does just the kind of traditional paint by numbers. He's trying, I think he's trying to be respectful to the original, to Howlin' Wolf. So he's not trying to be too flashy and too showy. And in the end, that's what hurts the song, is that we get something different, something unique, something new from Brian Johnson. We get this incendiary harmonica from Steven Tyler, and then the guitar, which is really the core of the song, the true bass of the song, comes off a little flat and ordinary. So, unfortunately, because of that, I can't recommend Killing Floor wholeheartedly. I think you should just listen to it once. I don't think it's going to become a staple in your weekly streaming playlists, but maybe check it out once just to hear these standout performances from Brian Johnson and Steven Tyler. Let's put it that way. All right, segment 2. Fini. Done. But that means we're only halfway home. And we've talked about the present. We've talked about new music. We've talked about music news, all about the present, what's going on right now. We'll talk about the future, of course, at the end of the show and wrap it up. But it's time to go back and discuss the past now as we get the rock and roll DeLorean fired up. 1.21 gigawatts. Doc Brown and I heading into the rock and roll time stream for I Want to Go Back, a mere 60 seconds away. So please stay tuned. The Fortress of Rock will be right back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Welcome back, everybody, to the Fortress of Rock here, Friday night, March the 22nd, 2024. I am your host, the Maestro Kevin Crane, also co-pilot here in the rock and roll DeLorean, as Doc Brown and I get this sucker up to 1.21 gigawatts. Take you into the rock and roll time stream for birthdays, anniversaries, important classic moments in rock and roll history. It seemed like I've been talking too fast in this episode, so I'm going to try to slow it down half a notch. But it's time for business. Got to cover some business. Here, as we always do at the beginning of segment 3, of course, segment 3 is I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. First up, let's talk sources for some of these ideas for stories here in segment 3, as well as in News of the World in segment 1. I would be remiss if I did not mention some of the places where I come up with some of these ideas. Some of them are mine, but of course it's news. So things happen in the world, I'm just reporting it. I see somebody else reporting it, and I am just kind of regurgitating it with my own personal spin on things. And of course, the 3 main sources, as always, for stories in segment 1 and segment 3 are ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the Van Halen News Desk. And of course, you found us somewhere. You're listening right now, so thank you. Very appreciative, as always, but you have options, you have choices, and we will not change them up on you like a Wendy's digital menu. You can listen to the Fortress of Rock each and every Friday night on Spotify, Google, Pocket Cast, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, and Audible. The reason why I got a little choked up there talking about Pocket Cast was because in my rundown list, right before them, I have Radio Public. And of course, Radio Public is still viable for a little more than a week. But as of March the 31st, 2024, they are going away. So next to last time, you will hear me discuss one of our favorite platforms that has had us since the beginning, Radio Public. Also, don't forget to check out the Facebook page. Fun stuff always going on the Facebook page. Of course, you know you will find links to each and every episode of the Fortress of Rock there. But Friday nights, along with posting the brand new podcast episode, we have the Weekend Rock Project. Doing something a little different this weekend, trying to make you guys think a little bit. Dong. Law and Order. We're taking this to court. If you have to defend one music act, one rock and roll act or performer, claiming that they are the greatest of all time, but you can only put forward 3 songs from this artist, what 3 songs are you bringing into the rock and roll court of law to prove that your band is the greatest, your performer is the greatest of all time? So check that out. I did not pick Van Halen. Too hard for me. I'm biased, prejudicial. I would be barred from defending Van Halen. Obviously, very hard just with the fact that they're fractured between 2 distinct eras, not to mention Gary Cherone. So I picked Led Zeppelin. Now, the easy picks for Led Zeppelin would have been, of course, Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog, and Rock and Roll. Personally, for me, though, I substituted because I think it's a better song. I took out Rock and Roll and I put in When the Levee Breaks. Already had some of our friends, some of our followers put out there Metallica and the Beatles. I knew the Beatles would be up there pretty quickly. Now, you can always defend the band with different songs. You can do that. And you can dispute the songs that anybody posted. U2 is out there as well. And Iron Maiden so far. So be sure to put your 2 cents in for the Weekend Rock Project. You don't even need to be a lawyer. You can just play one on a podcast. Then, of course, this Sunday, it is New Music Sunday, as always. Sunday afternoon, I will take a break from watching basketball and racing to put a new music video out there, a new song off of YouTube. Try to get you guys to listen to some new music. Of course, probably will be one of the songs we have reviewed here in Breakdown, or one we're going to in the coming weeks. All right, let's get into I Want to Go Back. Let's start with birthdays. Now, I will admit this is not the strongest slate of rock and roll birthdays here on March the 22nd. Starting off March the 22nd, 1963, Susan Ann Sully, one of the singers in the Human League. Of course, we all remember the Human League, had a couple massive hits in the 80s. Don't You Want Me, Human. And then because we cover the spectrum, yes, we are the Fortress of Rock, but we do like to acknowledge, on occasion, other forms of music, especially when it's a big name. So going back to March the 22nd of 1948, one of the most famous composers, I would say, of the last 40, 50, 60 years, Andrew Lloyd Webber, born on this day in 1948. Born on this day, March the 22nd, 1947, you don't want to hear me try to sing You sexy thing. But Patrick Olive, percussionist for Hot Chocolate, born on this day in 1947. People don't realize how under the radar Hot Chocolate was, especially overseas. But they had a lot more hits than you would think. Now, one of my personal favorites, getting into some jazz, some blues, some R&B. One of those performers that I always talk about that I grew up with in the late 80s and or late 70s and early 80s. Pardon me. Late 70s and early 80s. Formative years for the Maestro. Born on this day, March the 22nd, 1943, the great George Benson. George Benson, I actually, because I saw it was his birthday today, and in looking in my archives of all the CDs and all the albums and cassette tapes that I have no George Benson. So I immediately went online to Amazon to try to rectify it, but I'm very picky, very particular. Could not find, at least yet, on a cursory inspection of what they had to offer, could not find the ultimate collection. One that would have all the songs I would want in a George Benson greatest hits compilation. So I did not get anything yet. But keep in mind, George Benson had an absolute ton of hits. A lot of them were cover songs, but the man was unbelievable when it came to his singing and his guitar playing. To me, the one that stands out is On Broadway, his version of On Broadway. This Masquerade is fantastic. And then one of his originals became a monstrous hit for Whitney Houston, of course, The Greatest Love of All. Give Me the Night, Turn Your Love Around. Kind of like Hot Chocolate, just another one of those artists that we don't look back at enough here in the 2020s and give enough respect to. So happy birthday to the great George Benson. Honestly, I want to, once I'm done with the podcast, I want to listen to On Broadway and This Masquerade again. Great songs. Great songs. Then finally, when it comes to birthdays, another underrated rock and roll persona because he was overshadowed by other members of his band. But born on this day, March the 22nd, 1943, vocalist for the Yardbirds, Keith Relf. Now, of course, the Yardbirds, we all know, spawned later on the greatness of Jeff Beck and, of course, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. All right, let's move on to anniversaries. Some more interesting stuff here. Some big stuff from my wheelhouse, late 70s, early 80s. So let's get into it. But we'll start off, of course, most recent and go backwards. March the 22nd of last year, 2023. Tom Ledden, guitarist for Mudcrutch, passed away. Of course, Mudcrutch was Tom Petty's, I don't want to call it a side project, but it was the band he was in before Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and then, of course, he revived them for a couple albums. And, of course, Tom Ledden is the brother, or was the brother, of Bernie Ledden, one of the early members of the Eagles. Moving all the way back to March the 22nd of 2005, Rod Price, guitarist for Foghat, passed away. And Foghat's still out there, still alive and kicking. March the 22nd, 1994. Could be considered like George Benson and Hot Chocolate, another one of these performers that flies under the radar. Dan Hartman unfortunately passed away on this day at 43 years old. Now, most people know Dan Hartman from his number 6, peaking at number 6 US single, I Can Dream About You, from the soundtrack to Streets of Fire, the cult classic with a young Diane Lane and Michael Paré. Now, I've watched the movie here recently within the last few years. It did not age well. It did not age well. But you can't deny the fact that the song I Can Dream About You is a very catchy, typical 80s pop song. But that's not where Dan Hartman's legacy ends. He also co-wrote James Brown's, I believe, Living in America. And for sure, he was a member of the Edgar Winter Group, singing and writing one of their biggest hits, Free Ride, which you still hear on occasion on classic rock radio. Now we move down to 1980, March the 22nd of 1980. And I've always told you guys this. We talked in segment 1 about Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, and I know Mr. Negativity that I can be about certain acts, certain artists. And I've always said, I understand their place in the history of rock and roll. I am not denying that. I'm not saying they shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm just giving you my personal take on whether I like their music, their personalities, their attitudes, or not. On this day in 1980, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2 by Pink Floyd was the number 1 song in the United States on the Billboard charts. I'm not going to get into Roger Waters. Thankfully, mercifully, he's been pretty quiet the last month or two. So I will just say that again, I think Pink Floyd is vastly overrated. They're an interesting band, though, in the sense that when David Gilmour took over as the lead man, they maintained a lot of their popularity. A Momentary Lapse of Reason, The Mission Bell did very, very well with David Gilmour shepherding the band and, of course, taking over lead vocals. But most people, when they think of Pink Floyd, think of the classic era with Roger Waters, specifically Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. Now, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, still to this day, is iconic. It's interesting. It was different at the time. It's a great symbol of music for that era, in that you could put out anything, and if it was good and interesting, it would actually get play on the radio and it would actually sell. I can't say that about music nowadays. I haven't been able to say that about music in probably 25 years, but back in the great and glorious 70s and 80s, something a little darker, a little bit more offbeat, like Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 could actually become a massive success. March the 22nd, 1978. The Police sign a record deal with A&M Records. And of course, soon afterwards, rock and roll history was changed forever. March the 22nd, 1975. I mentioned Led Zeppelin. Even though they're not my favorite band, I took them in the Weekend Rock Project to defend them with 3 songs, arguing them as the greatest band of all time based on those 3 songs. On March the 22nd, 1975, Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti was the #1 album in the United States. Then finally, for anniversaries, March the 22nd, 1974. Seems like we've been talking a lot about the Eagles lately over the last year or so. On this day in 1974, the Eagles released their 3rd album, On the Border, and I believe that was the first of their albums featuring Don Felder, who, of course, I will get to see at Party Gras 2.0 later on this summer with Bret Michaels and Lou Gramm and Dee Snider. Now, as Doc Brown turns the rock and roll DeLorean around, gets it back into the garage at the Fortress, and we pull up the drawbridge over the moat, start to shut things down. I do want to point out, I cheat every once in a while when it comes to birthdays and anniversaries and all that stuff. I do want to point out that last Sunday, to be specific, or last Saturday, the 16th of March, birthday that I have to acknowledge every year, regardless of if it falls on the specific podcast episode day. Because, of course, it's in the Van Halen family. I will always do that for anybody in the Van Halen clan. David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar, the Van Halens, of course. So March the 16th, which would have been a day after last week's episode dropped. Happy birthday to Wolfgang Van Halen. And of course, we talked about him at the Oscars. Mom, Valerie Bertinelli, on one arm, his beautiful new wife on the other. Lucky man, very talented man. I think his father would be extremely and exceptionally proud of him and what he has done with his life to this date, but much, much more, hopefully, great stuff to come from one Wolfgang Van Halen. All right, Doc Brown's hitting the hay. I'm going to go and get something to eat, but before I do, here at the Fortress of Rock, one final segment left. Wrap it up. Our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds, where we talk about what music we are going to be reviewing and discussing in the coming month or so. So after one last break, I'll be right back. We'll spend a couple minutes talking about the future here on the Fortress of Rock. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, we're back with the Fortress of Rock here on March the 22nd, 2024, episode 136. As we wind it down, so you can enjoy your Friday night, I can enjoy my Friday night, whatever you choose to do. Sports, movies, a night on the town. Be responsible, don't drink and drive, and love the one you're with. Now, coming up in the future, over the next month or so here on the Fortress of Rock, yes, it is time for Wrap It Up. We have got, I don't want to say an overwhelmingly fantastic slate of new albums. We got to get through the next 3 weeks. Let's put it that way. If we get through the next 3 weeks, then we'll have a nice run. I know. I should not be negative Nancy. I should be touting the potential of all of these albums each and every week, but some you look forward to more than others. It's just inherent in our fandom. So next week, I will be reviewing the new album from Scott Stapp, lead singer of Creed, Higher Power. Now, I have been encouraged by some of the stuff I've heard off of this album, so trying not, again, to be Mr. Negativity. So next week, episode 137 on March the 29th, Higher Power from Scott Stapp. In 2 weeks, we will finally get around to The Other Side of Mars, the first solo album from former Motley Crue guitarist Mick Mars. That will be episode 138 on April the 5th. And then in 3 weeks, we will delve into the Mandrake Project from Iron Maiden lead singer Bruce Dickinson, episode 139 on April the 12th. After that, things perk up a little bit, at least in my perspective. A couple albums that I'm looking forward to a little bit more. One Deep River by the great Mark Knopfler, of course, formerly of Dire Straits, episode 140 on April the 19th, his latest solo album. And then in 5 weeks, we're going out 5 weeks, Dark Matter from Pearl Jam. If you want to go out to the theater and pay a ton of money to listen to it 3 days early, go for it. Get online and find out what theater near you can do that. But keep in mind that on April the 26th, episode 141 here on the Fortress of Rock, we will give you our full track-by-track review of Pearl Jam's brand new album, Dark Matter. Now, before we get to songs, our new feature we started in 2024, our tribute to Casey Kasem, America's Top 40. I'm sure there's a few of you out there like me who remember listening to the radio Sunday mornings, the Billboard charts, back when they actually mattered, and listening to the top 40 songs each and every week. So, in tribute to that, the Fortress of Rock's top album of the week and top songs of the week. Of course, I've already given you my enthusiastic recommendation in breakdown for Happiness Bastards by the Black Crowes, so that is indeed our number one album for this week. Now, in the next few weeks, I foresee a dogfight between the Black Crowes and Judas Priest. I'm not, again, convinced that any of these albums in the next few weeks are going to be good enough, powerful enough to take over arguably the two best albums so far of 2024. And everything with that is good and fine. Would get a little stale if every week my number one album was the exact album that I reviewed in this episode in Breakdown. Some albums are going to be better than others, and now that we finally got a couple great ones, those will probably be the ones I listen to the most over the next 3 or 4 weeks, in addition, of course, to the ones I'm going to be reviewing. But again, number one this week on the album charts here at the Fortress of Rock is Happiness Bastards by the Black Crowes, and I always like to give you a couple top songs of the week. Yes, it's cheating, but it's my podcast, so I don't care. We, of course, will take one of the songs from the new Black Crowes album. Let's go with Dirty Cold Sun as one of our top songs of the week. Get some deeper album tracks in here this week. So Dirty Cold Sun, and going back to last week's Invincible Shield from Judas Priest, let's throw Gates of Hell in there as well. So your top songs of the week here for episode 136, March the 22nd, 2024, Dirty Cold Sun by the Black Crowes and Gates of Hell by the mighty Judas Priest. Now, songs we're going to be discussing over the next few weeks. Some brand new to the slate here, some we talked about last week. Bon Jovi's Legendary. Still scared to death to listen to this any more than I already have. The time or two I've listened to it, oh boy, just screams generic. But I will review it for you, and it will probably most likely 99% be next week here on the Fortress of Rock. Of course, we're still waiting for Collective Soul to finally put out officially the first single from their upcoming double album, Here to Eternity. And I'm still thinking it's going to be Mother's Love, but now I'm not so sure. And I don't know why they're waiting so long. This album comes out in the middle of May, and they have not yet released a song from it. I hope that's not indication they're going to delay the release of the album. And we also talked about the massive charity single that Mark Knopfler has put out with Mark Knopfler's Guitar Heroes. Over 60 notable musicians, most of them guitarists, chiming in for a new rendition for charity again of Mark Knopfler's theme from Local Hero, Going Home. And we will have that for you again here soon on the Fortress of Rock. Now, some brand new songs on the slate this week coming up. Second single from Dark Matter. Again, feel free to go to the theater to listen to it and pay an exorbitant price. Second single from Dark Matter is Running. We'll have that for you here in the next week or two on the Fortress of Rock. This one depresses me because I have sampled it. Came out today, March the 22nd, just like Running did with Pearl Jam. And I listened to Running. Running sounds fine. Sounds great. Give me another 6, 7 listens before I give you a full review. But on first listen, Running sounds fantastic. I don't know if I can say that about the brand new song from one of my favorite bands, that one of those little personal favorite bands that you kind of like and very few other people really like them. They never caught on, but they've been around for a while, and they kind of fly under the radar, and they tour constantly, playing small clubs and bars, opening for bigger bands. Talking about the Black Moods. I should have been afraid when I got my Bands in Town notification proclaiming, and I'm paraphrasing here, but proclaiming a new era for the Black Moods. Oh God. Why are you changing things? Why are you messing with things? What is that supposed to imply? What does that mean? A new era. That sounds to me a lot like U2 before they made Zooropa and Pop. And of course, my fears look like they were grounded in reality, because I've listened to the brand new Black Moods song Heaven. And while it's not a complete and total left turn, it is not the same sound that I am used to from the Black Moods. So, in the next week or two, I will review, hopefully with a little bit better attitude towards it, the brand new song from the Black Moods, Heaven. And then finally, I got to give kudos to Ultimate Classic Rock for this one. Did not know about this band. This is why you got to listen to us. You got to go out there and check out all these different sources for music. Because every once in a while, either I will find it for you or you can find it on your own. You'll stumble across something new and interesting. A band called The Effect. Now, I guess I'm a little late to the party on this one. I guess they officially debuted last fall of 2023. Now, number one, let me tell you this. I am a big fan of cool band logos. Of course, Van Halen has the greatest logo of all time. Bar none, no doubt. But there are other cool ones out there. Rat, Cheap Trick. If you go check out The Effect and their logo, they put some thought into this, and it is really, really cool. I mean, awesome. Basically took all the letters in the word effect, rearranged them, made them almost look like a totem of sorts. Now, you might ask, why am I getting so excited about this band? I'm not necessarily excited. It's just cool to have a new band with a pedigree where we can listen to some of their new music. What pedigree does The Effect have? Well, if you remember, when Genesis did their final tour, of course, we know Phil Collins, not in the best of shape physically, could not play the drums on Genesis's final tour. His son, Nick Collins, filled in for him. as Phil sat basically on a stool to sing all the great Genesis songs. So his son, Nick Collins, played drums for Genesis on that final tour. Nick Collins is the drummer for The Effect. Now, also, if you know anything about Toto, one of the core members, if not the most important member of Toto throughout the years, has been Steve Lukather. His son, Trev Lukather, is also, I believe, a guitarist. He is definitely a member of The Effect. I'm pretty sure he is the guitarist, with what research I could pull up and what I could find about the band. So those are the positives. That's the pedigree for this band called The Effect. So their brand new song, they've got a couple songs out there, as I mentioned. They technically debuted last fall. I believe this is the third release from The Effect, a song called Toxic Envy. So we'll give that a shot. Do something different here for you on the Fortress of Rock. I've listened to it. I can't decide. It's going to be a tricky one to review. On first listen, part of me loved it, part of me did not like it at all. It kind of reminded me on first listen of 1980s Yes, for better or for worse. See what I mean? Now, the one thing I will say as we wrap up everything here on the Fortress of Rock for this week, that we got the pedigree with Phil Collins' son, Steve Lukather's son in this band. The bad thing is it sounds like and looks like they brought in a pretty boy generic lead singer, which is always the kiss of death for a band, in my opinion. You got to give me a David Lee Roth. You got to give me a Stephen Pearcy. Okay? Don't just put a pretty boy in front of your band with a mediocre voice just because he's good looking. You got to learn from past mistakes from other bands. Okay? Got to have the charisma, got to have the personality, and you got to have the singing chops to pull it off. So, those are my initial impressions of The Effect. And that's going to do it for the Fortress of Rock. Episode 136 is done. Again, take care of yourselves, take care of your family, your friends, your loved ones. Live every day to its fullest. I recently lost a friend of mine. I won't lie and say it was a dear close friend, but somebody I saw every year or two. One of the nicest, kindest human beings I've ever met. And when that happens, yes, all of us have probably lost family members, mothers, fathers, especially. But when you lose a peer, someone who's your age or even younger, as was the case here for me, it makes you think about life, and it makes you think about especially what I always say every week: love the one you're with, and tack on to that, live every day as best you can to its fullest. Don't take garbage from anyone. Stick up for yourself. Be happy, because you only get one ride on this roller coaster of life. 7 days from now, we will talk more about classic rock and roll, and we will keep it going as long as I can and as long as you want me to. So, until we get to episode 137, I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Take care of yourself. Love you. Talk to you next week. I'm out.